right. So most real estate investors spend a lot of time thinking about how to make money, but not nearly enough time thinking about how to keep it. Asset protection is one of those topics that for a lot of people sounds complicated. It's something they put off, think they can do it later. But it turns out it's usually a lot more straightforward than people expect, especially when someone explains it clearly. So today we have a special guest from Nevada corporate headquarters at NCH, Adam Kintigh. He's one of the leading asset protection and business services companies in the country. And he's going to do exactly that, help us understand asset protection. So we'll talk about LLCs, trust, insurance, what asset protection actually does, what it doesn't do, and how investors should be thinking about it as their portfolios grow. Before we get into the weeds, a quick note. Today's conversation is educational. Nothing here is legal advice. Every investor situation is different. So we want you to walk away with a clear framework for thinking about asset protection, so you know the right questions to ask when you actually sit down with your own advisor. So Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Can you give us a quick overview of your background and what NCH does for real estate investors specifically?
Yeah, so our firm, NCH, this is now our 36th year in business. We have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. I think we're the only entity formation company in the country. We have a perfect 5-star rating with Trustpilot, and altogether over like 19,000 5-star reviews. We're a good company, provide good service. The backbone of our company is we form corporations and LLCs. In-house, we have a full legal department. We are partnered with one of the best CPA firms. So we do tax and accounting for business owners and investors all over the country. We have a business credit team if you want to separate business credit from personal credit. We have a team that does custom business plans. There might be a point where you're doing a loan and a lender wants to see a business plan. I have a team that does that. We do estate planning like trust and wills, and then also self-directed IRAs and self-directed solo 401ks. So it is all the support services for business owners and investors is what our firm specializes in. Personally, I started this in January of 2001. I had a friend, went to school at Iowa State my senior year. I dropped out when I learned how much money I wasn't going to make doing engineering. And I was in the financial services. By that time, I was licensed in 43 states doing insurance and doing well with that. So life took a few turns. I ended up in Las Vegas, and my friend said, Adam, you got to get into corporations. And I said, Nate, I am not an attorney. I am not a CPA. How in the world am I going to do that? He said, well, I have a friend that owns this company. Why don't you go talk to him and see what happens? I did. And I said, Adam, you seem really smart. Here's a stack of books. Read these and be here by Monday. So that was in January of 2001. Well, fast forward, I got hired by Court Christie, got hired as a director at NCH in January of 2008. And I have been with NCH now for a little over 18 years. And I'm really, really fortunate and blessed. I get to work with top attorneys, top CPAs, top financial advisors, and helping people to put all these pieces together the right way. And if you can imagine, day in and day out, working with all kinds of scenarios and situations. So my goal is always to help our clients to do things in a way that is manageable, scalable, and financially efficient. There's a lot of different ways to do things, but whatever you choose to do, you have to manage all these things. So we want to make sure that you're able to do it and do it right. So that's our importance of work with NCH, is making sure it's set up right, and then you're operating it properly and staying in compliance. Really simple stuff if someone tells you what to do.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I'll speak for myself here, and I know John as well. I mean, we've worked with you for years, right? So we have a personal experience with you. We know how you operate. We know the structures you guys put in place, and like you said, there's a lot of ways to do this, right? There's more than one way you ask 3 different lawyers, they'll probably give you 3 different answers, right? But we've always trusted your guidance, your team of lawyers, your team of experts there that supports you and us, right down to having like a corporate coach, right? So let's just jump in here, man. I know that sometimes there's some common misconceptions with asset protection. When investors hear asset protection, what do you think that means? Like, how is it different from what it actually does per se?
Yeah, what I hear a lot of is people say, well, I don't have any assets. I own my own home. It's got a mortgage on it, and I really don't have any quote unquote assets to protect. Mm-hmm. Well, that's completely false. You have future wages. and try taking 25% of every dollar you make for the next Lord knows how long in the event of an accident, and you are held personally liable for it. That's where we make sure that you, your family, your future wages are protected. That to me is asset protection, separating yourself from the business or yourself from your investments, so that if there is ever an accident, the business risks are not going to affect your personal life. And conversely, you don't want your personal life to affect your business.
Yeah, I love that answer, man. And would you say that, so if we're looking at what asset protection does, like what does it protect you from and what doesn't it protect you from typically?
So the LLC, and this is where the comes into play. What state are you going to incorporate in? If you form a corporation or an LLC, you're putting up a wall between you and your company, and that is the corporate veil. And the corporate veil is arguably one of the most valuable benefits offered from forming a corporation or LLC. It's that invisible line, the invisible wall that separates you. And that corporate veil, interesting stat, most people think, well, I formed my LLC, I went and paid the Secretary of State some fees, and I got an EIN number, and I opened my bank account up, and boy, that was easy. The days of filing the documents and thinking you're good are gone. It is so very important when we're forming a company, that corporate veil, it gets pierced over 50% of the time. And you look at statistically speaking, if there is an accident, whether you own a property, a business, whatever it may be, if there's an accident, statistically speaking, that corporate veil gets pierced over 50% of the time. Then you realize that over 51% of plaintiffs win the case. Odds are pretty stacked against you that if there's an accident, is this going to protect you or not? And we'll talk about insurance later, but that's your number one goal, is to have that separation. And if it's not done right, then you're operating with this false sense of security. I literally just had a guy 2 days ago call me and said, Adam, I was referred to you by so-and-so. I said, okay, how can I help? He said, well, I just got a notice here. I'm getting sued. I said, it's terrible. What happened? He said, well, my girlfriend was driving my car, and allegedly she ran a stop sign and she got T-boned, but allegedly because she ran the stop sign, that it was her fault. And he said, it was my car, and now I just got a notice I'm being sued and my LLC is being sued. They're suing me and the company because it was a company vehicle. He is in a terrible spot. So we pull up his business, and it shows right on record he formed it himself. He has no legal documents that he's supposed to have. So the chances of that thing actually protecting him is darn near zero. Any halfwit, they subpoena any of his corporate records, which he does not have. And that's where we go back to that veil getting pierced over 50% of the time. And that's exclusively with small business. When you have 5 shareholders or less, that makes it really easy for lawyers to make alter ego claims. They say, well, you own the LLC, you control the LLC, you are the LLC. This is nothing more than a sham. So that's where that problem lies, and it comes into place, is keeping that shield strong so you don't have any chinks in your armor, so they can't get you or get your family, or like in this guy's case, he's got an issue that's affecting his business and personal life because the stuff wasn't done right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you kind of hit the nail on one of my questions there. We have a question about like, what's one of the single biggest myths about asset protection that you hear from investors? Would you say that it is the corporate veil and thinking that if they they create the LLC in the state that they're actually in, that they're somehow protected? As we know, Wyoming and Nevada have amazing small business corporate veil protection, right? So what would you say is that biggest myth that you hear a lot from investors?
Yeah, so setting up Nevada and Wyoming truly are 2 of the best states to incorporate in. They specifically have laws that protect small business. If you told me that you're going to form a company and you're going to sell stock and raise capital and take it public, then we'd be talking about Delaware. Delaware, most of the big companies, Microsoft, Walmart, Disney, they're Delaware corporations. If you remember a few years ago when Elon Musk was going to be buying Twitter, And Twitter, which by the way is headquartered in San Francisco, California. He was scheduled, he's going to buy Twitter, and then he saw the bots, and then he wasn't going to buy Twitter, and he's trying to back out of the deal. And he was scheduled to go to court in Wilmington, Delaware. Well, if anybody's ever been to Wilmington, Delaware, it's a tiny place. How are all these major companies all headquartered in Delaware? You simply have a registered agent in Delaware that serves as your quote unquote state of formation. So Delaware's got all these great laws for big business, but they are notorious for very, very strict formalities. When it comes to small business, Nevada, thanks to the mob, no joke, back in the 1950s and 60s, mob comes to Nevada, they start heavily influencing our politicians to create all these great laws to protect their business operations. So even though the mob officially moved to Wall Street back in the 90s, I think, Nevada kept its laws strong for small business, big revenue generator for Nevada. Well, over the years, Nevada has kept raising its fees. Wyoming has come in and modeled their laws after Nevada, again, targeting special laws for small business. That's what they're about. And you get to shop. Where do you want to set your LLC up? That is the state that we're going to be able to get protection. So when it comes to the corporate veil, that is, there's a federal law called the Internal Affairs Doctrine. It is also echoed in every state law statute as well. It tells the courts very clearly, the laws of the state of incorporation shall govern the internal affairs and liabilities of managers and members of LLCs. So if I set up a Wyoming entity and I register appropriately with Alabama and there's an accident, well, yeah, we're going in front of an Alabama judge. But the judge has two options. Either he or she can apply Wyoming law to the case, or they might recuse themselves and say, Eesh, we don't want to deal with this Wyoming stuff. Go file the lawsuit in Wyoming. Either way, we get those protections. Now, big falsity, this has absolutely nothing to do with taxes. Taxes are filed exactly the same as if you had set it up in your home state or Alabama or wherever. The fact is, it used to be years ago because Nevada has no state income tax, and neither does Wyoming. But by incorporating in Nevada, you wouldn't have to pay your state income taxes. That is 100% false.
Yeah.
If you live in California, I don't care where you make money from. You gotta pay California taxes on whatever money you make. So merely forming a company in Nevada or Wyoming, to think that you're not going to have to pay your state income taxes is completely wrong. There are times where you could do something like that. For example, if I were to set up a C corporation and I have an office in Nevada or a warehouse in Nevada, and that is truly our headquarters, okay, good. Then I will get the tax benefits of Nevada, but that is very rare that people do that. And a lot of people that we have that live in California, they say, well, how do I get out of paying that darn $800 franchise tax? They charge everybody that franchise tax if you have the corporations or LLCs.
We know.
And tell them there is one solution. It involves a U-Haul. Because as long as you're living in California, you'll probably pay that tax.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, man. That leads into the next conversation. You bring up taxes, but also, real estate investors are constantly, talking about how do I get tax benefits? How do I protect myself in the right way? Switching gears here to real estate investors specifically, is there a timeline? So does every real estate investor need an LLC from day one? Because a lot of investors say this, hey, I'm only buying one property.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are like, maybe I'll open it up later. Maybe I'll wait. I'm of the ilk that says if you're going to buy a hard asset, especially out of state, get protection in place, right? So what are your thoughts on the timing protection of specific real estate investors, even if they're starting with one or two doors?
Yeah. So the question becomes, could you drive your car without car insurance? Sure you could. Yeah. Do you have to put your seatbelt on? No, you don't. If you get sued, could you represent yourself in the court of law? Yeah, you can represent yourself as an attorney. But if you got something to lose, if you have future wages, you have a family, you have an asset like a home, please don't be driving around without insurance.
Yeah.
please make sure you buckle your seatbelts up. And please don't represent yourself in a court of law. Hire a professional to do it. And it is no different than when you're buying an asset. It's a small fee to set up an entity, a small fee to maintain, but it is absolutely worth it to have the peace of mind that knowing this is set up right. And as I grow and build my portfolio, I've got the right vehicle in place to make sure that all of my stuff is protected and that me and my family and my future wages are protected. So, for those that say I just have one property, or, well, get an umbrella policy, that'll fix it. It's up to you on how you want to do it. But at the end of the day, you step back and look at it, it's really not that expensive. Very simple to set up and very simple to maintain. I just can't see any reason why someone says, "Oh, I'm just not going to do that." But that saying, penny wise and pound foolish.
Yep. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. We absolutely encourage people to do that. What would you say is one of the most common mistakes investors make when forming LLCs? I mean, like you said, there's so many ways to set it up. I know for me, one of the biggest mistakes I see is people set up a ton of LLCs, right? Like an LLC in Wyoming, and then in every state they're investing, and then they put one LLC. They open up an LLC per property. That's one of the biggest ones I see, is just the cost from a cost standpoint. But what would you say one of the biggest common mistakes investors make is when formation happens?
Yeah, it's like you talked about. You could have a Wyoming LLC owning all your home state LLCs, and that's one way to do it. The system will probably work well for many people.
Sure.
But again, you got to make sure that whatever you're doing, right, you got to manage all this stuff. And if you want that LLC to be treated as its own person, then you have to have its own bank account and its stuff to make sure you're keeping that legal separation. Otherwise, there's a lot of states where they have the enterprise law theory. They say, well, you have the same ownership of all of these companies, the same address for all of these companies, the same CPA for all these companies, the same attorney for all these companies. We're going to lump them all together. That's the enterprise law theory. It had to happen to a guy in New Jersey, 21 rental properties, and that happened to him. He got sued. There was actually a lady, she was drunk and high, was a squatter, slipped and fell and broke her leg and sued him. And when I talked to him, he was explaining to me how he set up. Say, yes, Adam, it's so easy. Every time I buy a new property, I would pay $125 to the state of New Jersey. I'd go onto the IRS website and get an EIN number, go down to the bank, and they give me an account. And that was that. Did that every time. And fast forward, he's got the 21 properties. They're all between 350 and 450,000. And again, this is several years ago. So that one accident took place. They sued that business and they sued him personally. He got brought into a deposition and he had to list everything he owns. Failure to disclose your stuff, that's a felony. You're darn right you're telling them what you've got. He had to list all 20 other LLCs, which now that lawyer hit the jackpot. It went from a small suing one property to now coming after everything because it wasn't set up and operating properly. So that's, and even if it was, he paid someone to do it, the fact that it is a New Jersey entity, it still would be, whether he did it right or not, it's always a possibility.
Sure.
Which is why, again, we look at using Nevada and Wyoming just to change that. Mistake I see all the time, and again, setting up multiple LLCs, one for each property, is not necessarily a mistake, but it gets costly and time consuming. So we have a little more efficient way to do it, where we use one LLC, and then we have each property goes into its own real estate privacy trust. It's like a land trust on steroids. It allows us the separation without having to do a bunch of different LLCs. So great way to do things. I have one LLC that collects the rent, pays the expenses, whatever is left over gets bank transferred to you or you and your partners. So a very efficient way to do it. Mistake I see a lot is oftentimes people will form their LLC and they will list themselves as managing member or member. Well, the word member equals owner. And I always tell people, we do our best to keep your membership or your ownership private. But at the end of the day, with technology today, if someone wants to find out what you own, well, they sure will. An asset search, it used to cost a lot of time and a lot of money. You have to hire a private investigator and go dig through county records to try and figure out what somebody owes. Well, now, if I have your name and social security number, within a matter of minutes, we will be able to find everything. And when we talk about the social security number, shame on all of us. We go to the doctor's office. What do they want? Last 4 digits of your social. Yeah, there's some simple programs that we can go get the first 5 digits of your social through this program, and then your other stuff is over there. We openly give all this information for those people that say they're going to have privacy or try and hide things. Good luck. So I say we do our best to keep your membership private. Ultimately, in my view, the only people that really have to know that you are the member/owner of anything would be hard money lenders, private money lenders, banks, the IRS, of course, and who you choose to tell. So, things like business cards, social media, things of that nature. I just remind people, all that stuff that you brag about and you put, you own this and you own that, it can and will be used against you in the court of law. Keep that membership private. Be the secret millionaire, the millionaire next door that people don't know about. That's really the best practice, especially in today's litigation climate. Turn on, watch a YouTube video or a TikTok, and you see all these influencers, Morgan and Morgan with over 1,000 attorneys in every state. If we don't win, you don't pay a dime. So I just remind people, the poorest people in the country can hire the best attorneys, cost them nothing. And these poor attorneys, like 1.3 million attorneys in the US, there's just not enough good cases to go around. So these guys get stuck taking bad cases with bad facts, just trying to make a living. And like I said, statistically, 51% of the time, the plaintiff is going to win. So in forming the company, I always set it up where you're on record as the manager. The membership or the ownership I would assign to you or to your family trust for estate planning purpose. That's not on public record anyway. So the important thing is not just using your entity to enter into contracts and agreements. And if you're an LLC, well, you better put comma LLC. Make sure it's designated. Don't leave that part off. If agreements ask for initials, you can just initial with your initials. If it asks for a signature, well, you should always sign your name, comma manager, or your name as manager of ABC Properties LLC.
Interesting.
The reason that's so important is that, and I was just at an event a few weeks ago, and the guy was telling me that he personally got sued, and because he didn't have his name as manager, that lawsuit came up. His lawyer said, yeah, pay the guy the 20 grand. We'll settle this case. It's going to cost you a hell of a lot more than that if you try and fight this. So literally had to write a check for 20 grand because he didn't have his name signed properly. Very, very important. It's one of another benefit that we get from doing Nevada and Wyoming entities is they have statutory indemnification, whether you're acting as a manager, member, managing member, agent, or employee of the LLC. You could not be held personally liable for any lawful acts of that company. So on contracts and agreements, it's very important that we're signing as manager, just so that everybody knows I did not sign that as an individual. I signed that agreement as an officer of my company under the protection of my company. Such a simple thing.
Huge. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple obviously really good nuggets there. You mentioned the trust piece, which we're going to hit on here in a second. So, shifting gears into the trust process with you guys, you'd mentioned doing the one LLC with the multiple land trusts underneath. I think there's a misconception that you're going to have somehow hinder financing or refinancing if you place properties in land trusts. Can we hit on that real quick, and then we'll go into some other points around the trust? I mean, I am not concerned. I am curious about the options for investors if they're doing these big structures and they have 10 doors and 10 land trusts, right? If they want to go and refinance out or do a rate and term refi or something like that, how does it work to actually go to the lender and get a DSCR loan? Because some lenders say, hey, we can't do things inside of trusts. So
yeah, great. Super good question. So the first thing when you're buying the property and you're building your rental portfolio, you usually get the best rates when you buy the property using your name and your credit.
Sure.
So I go ahead and buy the house and I get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And I could just quit claim that property into an LLC. So that quit claim is how I convey moving the property from you to your LLC or from you to a trust. It's quit, QUIT, claim. deed. So I could just quit claim it into the LLC and now you are protected. But you just violated the mortgage agreement. So most likely your bank has a due on sale clause that you put it anywhere else, you change that title and they want their money. I don't see that happen very often, but it's like lightning striking. We know it happens all over the place. We don't know when, we don't know where. So by putting the property into the trust, there's a federal law called the Garn-St. Germain Act of 1982. We put the property into a trust. The bank cannot invoke the due on sale clause. We don't have to worry about it. And that's for residential property, fourplex, triplex, duplex, single family home, townhome, condo. We get that protection of the Garn-St. Germain Act.
Sure.
If you're buying the property as a DSCR loan, the lender usually says, all right, well, we can do it in your name. We'll write the property must be in your name, or we will do it in the name of the LLC. So ideally, yeah, let's write that loan in the name of the LLC. So your LLC now owns the property. What next? When you talk with your lender, just simply tell them, hey guys, I want to close in my LLC's name, but I'd like to go ahead and deed the property into we refer to it as a revocable trust. Half the time they say yes, half the time they say no. If they say yes, great. We'll just have that trust all put together, and at closing, just deed it right in that trust at closing. Or if the lender says, no, you got to close in the LLC name. Okay, we'll close in the LLC, and you just ask your lender, I'm going to deed that into the trust. You want to wait 30 days, 45 days? What do you want? And the lender will tell you, once you buy the property, they're A-okay with you changing it wherever. Your important piece as an investor is to communicate that with the lender. Now, when you're buying using a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, usually it's a terrible idea to bring up the word trust because a lot of times people hear the word trust and they automatically say, oh, you can't do that because there's so many types of trust out there. But if you're specific and saying to your lender, hey, I'm going to buy the property, we'll close in my name. I would like to deed the property into a revocable grantor trust. It's a simple inter vivos trust. Can we do that? And again, half the time is yes, half the time is no. If they say no, then we'll close in your name and we'll just quit claiming in the trust after. Same exact concept. The part that's important is make sure let your insurance guy know, say, hey, just put my property into a revocable grantor trust. Probably a good idea to add that LLC as an additional insured on the property. Work with your insurance guy to make sure that's right, just so we don't have any issues down the road.
Love it, man. And we're talking about, you're using the term revocable. Are we talking about something different than the land trust here, or are we still talking about land trust as well?
It's a land trust. Yeah,
Okay.
The type of trust, the land trust, or our attorney gets mad when I call it a land trust because they're so much better. The real estate privacy trust is a revocable grantor trust. So that's the type of trust that it is. That when they hear those words and they're magically okay with that. If you said irrevocable trust or we tell them what type of trust it was, that's when they don't know, and their best answer is tell you, no, you can't do that.
Okay, got it. Okay, so a couple options we can do. Sometimes the lender will let you close in the name of the LLC and deed it directly to the trust at closing. Other times we can close in the name of the LLC and then quit claim the property directly to the trust. Now, if you're doing a conventional loan, you're always going to have to close in your personal name and then do the quit claim after that. Do you feel like there's something that a trust solves that an LLC doesn't?
Yeah, well, first of all, depending on what state you're buying the property in, if you deed the property into an LLC, you could have transfer tax issues. Like Florida, for example, you got the documentary stamp tax of 70 cents per $100 of financing. You got a loan on there, you're paying this extra tax to put it into an LLC. You put it into a trust, no documentary stamp tax.
Interesting.
So, we don't have to worry about the mortgage part of it. B, that trust has no bank account, no tax return, no renewal fees. Very simple to set up, very simple to maintain. That is the allure of using that trust. It separates the liability of each property without having to have a bunch of LLCs. So that's, I guess, the benefit of doing it that way. Not to mention that, if later on, you'd mentioned earlier, if you're going to refinance a property, well, moving a property out of an LLC back into your name, that could create a transfer tax or some type of a taxable event. Well, moving it from a trust, if a bank says to you, hey, I need you to put the property out of the trust back to your name, we'll fund the loan, you can put it back into the trust. It's just a simple quick claim deed. And again, we don't have to worry about transfer tax issues. So ease of use, they are wonderful. And if it's
Got it.
done right, we don't have to worry about the transfer taxes or anything of that nature. I was actually doing a refinance a few months ago, and I fully expect the lender said, hey, deed that back to your name. We'll fund the loan. You can put, so I asked, hey, you want me to put the property back in my name? She said, oh, no. You can leave it right there in the trust. We can do the refi. We do it all the time. Didn't even have to move the property. So just remember, we're
Okay.
a slave to the lender. Whatever they want to see, that's what we'll do. Just
Fair
hope
enough.
if you're using an LLC, better hope you don't have transfer tax issues.
Yeah. Got it. Good, man. I mean, obviously a lot of really good stuff, and we're gonna shift gears over to the insurance piece there. I know, John, we're gonna kick it over to you, my friend, on the insurance side there.
Yeah.
So feel free to take it away there, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we jump into insurance, we always talk about practicing what we preach. I don't know, for those of you who are watching the podcast on video, you can see behind me I have all these burgundy and gold
Oh yeah.
files back here. Those are land trusts, LLCs, revocable living trusts. So we've been working with NCH for a long time and been super happy. I'm going to put a kid through college maybe back there. I don't know with all this. But anyways, I digress. So in addition to all that protection, I know something that I've always done my best to do is to also insure my properties, whether that's from a non-owner occupied insurance process, also with umbrella liability policies. Adam, you talk to a lot more investors than I do about protection on a day-to-day basis. What do you see like a lot of investors doing and like where are they screwing up and where would you kind of want to guide them in the insurance world as they layer in these LLCs and privacy trusts and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that is a really, really important question because if you have someone that gets an LLC and they think, oh, we're doing the LLC, we don't need insurance. That is false. You always keep good insurance. But remember that you buy insurance as a hedge against loss. Yep. So we spread the risk among many. So if something bad happens, we're just paying out a little bit. Mm-hmm. Well, your insurance company, if they paid out on every claim that came through, they would quickly go bankrupt. So they have adjusters and attorneys whose job is to pay out as little as possible when you make a claim.
Yep.
You're competing with your insurance company to pay out the least amount impossible is when something bad happens. Who do you think is going to win every time? Your insurance company.
Yeah.
And they have a duty to pay. If something happens, they have to pay out. They have a duty to pay things. However, how much are they going to pay? That is the key. The guy I was just telling you about that had the car accident. He said to me, he said, Adam, of course I have insurance, but the insurance company is only paying out $25,000 per bodily harm. And there was 2 passengers in that car and they're paying out $50,000. That is it. And you do not want to be in that position. I was just talking to a good friend of mine. He runs for the VA. He runs transportation logistics stuff. Mm-hmm. And he said, do you know how much money it costs to transport a patient via ambulance to the hospital? Is ridiculously expensive. And then he said, you're looking at $8,000 to $12,000 just for a ride to the ambulance to the hospital. And God forbid they have to life flight you. He said they bill out. He said, I just signed off on one last week. It was $120,000 for a 3-hour helicopter ride on life flight.
Wow.
The bills are ridiculous. So when that happens, if someone goes to the hospital for a day or an overnight stay, and the insurance company isn't paying it, and you don't have good insurance, you're in a terrible position. So I remind everybody, keep good insurance. But that is a hedge against loss. Insurance is not asset protection. And then all the time I have people come back and say, oh, just get an umbrella policy. Umbrellas are cheap. You can get a $1 million umbrella policy. Usually costs $200-300 a year. It begs the question, why is that umbrella so cheap? The answer, the umbrella only kicks in if the underlying policy exhausts its policy limits. So if you had say you had a $300,000 policy on a property, and you go talk to your insurance guy about getting $1 million umbrella, he'd probably come back and say, hey, that 300 has to be raised to the max 500,000. Everything's got to be max on the underlying policy before you can do the umbrella.
Yep.
And in my view, I think everybody should have an umbrella policy. And I heard that your chances of winning the Texas state lottery are probably twice as good as your umbrella policy paying out.
Fair enough. There's a fun fact for you.
In my view, I have that umbrella. If there's a car accident, in my view, that's probably the only thing that I see that the insurance might max out a policy limit. That's why I've got the umbrella. But keep good insurance. It's just not asset protection. So that is a rule. And you need to communicate with your insurance guy. So, for example, if you had a property sitting vacant, you better call your insurance guy and tell him, because if the policy, it's a rental property and they have it as a rental policy, but if the property was vacant for more than 30 days or more than 60 days, who knows? Every insurance company is different. If it was vacant for a certain period of time and you didn't tell the insurance guy, accident happens, flood, fire, whatever, they could come back and deny the claim. Why? Because you should have changed it to a vacant dwelling policy and you didn't.
Yep.
And now they don't have to pay. Unbelievable stuff. But that communication with your insurance guy is important. So just good things to know and to keep in mind. Owning a business or owning investments is keep good insurance, do the LLC, do it properly, because that's what's going to protect you and separate you from the business. So it's really that trifecta of having both good insurance, or I'm not trifecta, but having good insurance and having your asset protection, having your LLC, and then having the proper trust or the proper estate planning in place. Now, those are all things that we try and put together to make sure that these are right for you and your family.
I love it. Now, one other question to follow up on that, because for most of us who've gotten insurance, whether it's on our primary residence or on a vehicle or even a rental property, right? Which a rental property insurance would be a non-owner occupied insurance policy. Normally, we would just go and get that insurance policy in our name, right? Because it's directly related to us. How does an LLC interact with the issuance of that insurance? And is there any changes that you would recommend that you make with the insurance policy once you place a property in an LLC or a vehicle in an LLC or something like that?
Yeah. And another great point, a great reason why using these real estate privacy trusts are so cool. If you quit claiming your property to an LLC and the bank sells the mortgage or they do an internal audit and they see that your name is not on record, that's where they could always invoke the due on sale clause. Well, so you go ahead and put the property in the LLC, you got a 30-year fixed rate mortgage on it. You call your insurance guy and say, hey, let's put my property into an LLC. You need to make sure that policy is right.
Yeah. The
bank immediately gets notified that it went to an LLC, which is not you. And people fail. Well, yeah, but I own the LLC. But then legally, it's not you. And just like you said, well, but I own the LLC. You're treating it like that. That's exactly how a lawyer is going to treat it.
Yep.
So it's his own person. So if you put the property into a trust, now banks are very accustomed because of that federal law, the Garn-St. Germain Act. They see the trust name on there. They don't blink an eye. It's trust. They're fine.
I love that.
So, good way to do it.
That's awesome, man. Appreciate the insight, because I know it's a question I get asked all the time about insurance policies and how to set them up and what's enough insurance with my LLC. So appreciate that.
I was going to ask Nate and John, from your experience on like the investor side and also working particularly with like real estate investors, turnkey investors. John, you said a lot of people always bring that up about insurance. Do you have any experiences of where that insurance has come into play? Why it's so important to get that early on and not after?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. One is like, if you're going to finance the property, a bank's always going to require it, right, to protect their interest, right? Your insurance policy is always going to be a minimum of whatever the loan amount is in almost every single case, so that if the house does burn to the ground, the insurance company can write a check to the lender and get their debt or your debt paid off, so that they're protected. But I can't even begin to talk about how many times, like I'll give a perfect example. Like Nate and I just had a property burned to the ground in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank God it was vacant and no one was in it, but burnt straight to the ground, right? And, you know, the first call is the insurance company, and they stroked a check for us, to us for whatever the policy amount was. We still retained ownership of the home, and we were able to sell the land and whatever was left of the foundation to another investor that wanted to purchase it. So, you know, that's personal. I've had students call and tell me that they've had, you know, people run cars through their houses because they thought that was in park and it was not. And the next thing you know, they're watching TV from the front seat of their driver's side car, and, you know, all kinds of things like that. So, you know, insurance is always a thing you want to make sure you have.
Yeah, and I'll back that statement up. I mean, Adam, you've said this before too. I mean, you can have the asset protection in place, you can have the corporate veil protection, and let's say the veil is pierced. Well, what's the next layer? Like typically, if someone gets sued, who's typically paying out? Well, the insurance company a lot of times is the one making that payout, right?
Yep.
And so having that in place is obviously key. And I wanted to ask it real quick. I hate to jump back real quick. Can you just quickly define umbrella policy for people out there who might not know what that term means?
Yeah. So you have your auto insurance, and you have your homeowner's insurance, and then you have an umbrella, which the insurance companies are genius. They say the word umbrella, it makes you think it covers what? Everything. But again, the news flash, that umbrella policy only kicks in if underlying policy exhausts its policy limits. So keep good insurance. But the umbrella is supposed to cover everything. But again, you can get $1 million for $200-300 a year. As a business, if I'm a small business, I'm going to get a general liability policy for $1 million. It's costing me $800 to $1,500 to do a $1 million general liability versus the umbrella, who's supposed to cover everything, is only a couple $100. Why is that?
Yeah, it's odd. Yeah.
And you said something that I wanted to address. You said, you know, if the veil is pierced and you have the insurance, Nate, in all my time of doing this, I have never seen a case for a Nevada or Wyoming where that veil has been pierced unless someone was committing fraud. And I have personally seen that one time. That is it. But it was fraud. So when I talk about fraud, we're talking there's a few cases where people that were involved in Ponzi schemes, like that Bernie Madoff deal. There was a few cases, guys were selling mining rights for land that was owned by the Bureau of Land Management. You know, it's like you or me trying to sell the Statue of Liberty. There was a recent case in Wyoming. It's called the Green Hunter Energy case, where a corporation, they had set up a wholly owned subsidiary LLC, and then they ran it as a complete sham to defraud creditors. And that one was interesting because what happened is that they said, okay, well, this subsidiary LLC, and I won't get too technical, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not giving tax or legal advice, but the LLC was disregarded, meaning the IRS does not expect you to file a separate return. So many of you, it's just you or you and your spouse, your LLC is disregarded. It does not even file a separate return. All the profits and losses just reported in your personal return, exactly the same as if you did not have the LLC. So because this case happened, and in front of the courts, they found that because that LLC, all profits and losses were reporting on the parent company's tax return, making liable the parent company. Kind of logical, right? All the profits are reporting on the parent company, they should be held liable. When that happened, they pierced the veil of that LLC and they held the parent company liable. But the Wyoming legislature met and they came back and they said, no, that was not our intent. So they codified into the state law statutes, you cannot even look at where profits are being distributed to unless you can prove fraud. That is incredible. So for all those people that say, well, just because it's disregarded for tax purpose, that somehow if it's reporting on your return, it makes you liable, another reason to use the Wyoming entity and get this thing done right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love that, man. Well, good. I think we're going to kind of wrapping up here to the last couple of sections of this here. Just talking about some common mistakes like the early investors make. Would you say that the cost ever comes into play? Like investors always, I forgot your quote earlier about, not doing things properly, just try to save a penny, right? You had a good quote there. how much does it typically cost to fix mistakes after the facts versus just getting it done right the first time? I mean,
It,
I guess it's a rhetorical question, but I'd be curious. I mean, you just mentioned some cases there that probably cost tens of thousands, if not the millions of dollars, right? In terms of,
yeah, right now I am trying to help a lady. She has assisted living facilities and some other things going on, and she had a structure put in place years ago. Um, Corporation, LLC, different things happening, and well, for whatever reason, she changed CPAs, and she had no idea how that thing was operating, and it is right now uh, the because the taxes weren't done right, the penalties and interest on that is incredibly high. Restructuring everything is going to cost thousands of dollars, but it has to be done. It's
Mhm.
not right. So yeah, I said the saying, penny wise, pound foolish. Well, I remind people, you think working with a professional is expensive, go hire an amateur. It
Yeah,
always
it's a
costs
good
you
point.
more.
So
That's a good
true.
point. Yeah, yeah. And then do it yourself, and then go to a court case and hire a lawyer. See how expensive that is to work with a lawyer representing you, right? So
Well, and yeah, I'm pretty sure I was at an event in Dallas. I'm pretty sure that both of you were there. It was a 3-day rental property boot camp. And one of the students, or one of the people in the audience, is an attorney that specializes in suing businesses. And at the end of class, he says, yeah, I hear you telling the audience that the corporate veil gets pierced 50% of the time. Well, I'm an attorney and I am in the business of suing businesses, and I specialize in piercing the corporate veil. Other law firms hire me to pierce the veil. That's what I do.
Hmm.
Said, I see 1, 2, 3 people's name on record with the Secretary of State. I pierce the veil almost 95% of the time. But
Wow.
no one ever sets these things up right. They never maintain them properly. And we have a huge success in veil piercings. He said, if I see Nevada or Wyoming, I won't even take the case. They can't get paid. He said, I'm glad more people don't know about Nevada and Wyoming, or I would be out of a job.
mhm.
Fair
No
enough.
joke. So getting it done and getting it done right. So you say, okay, well, it needs to be a Wyoming entity. Well, I can do that. Okay, well, you go do that. It's all going to show right there.
Sure.
We can find whoever forms an entity, we can find it right there on public record. And the
Yeah.
whole reason that lawyer said he pierces the veil 95% of the time, it's all right there for God and everybody to see who formed it. Was it done right? Probably not. And even when you pay a professional, sometimes, like a person I was talking to over the weekend, pay their CPA to help with the LLC. It's wrong. Why? Well, the CPA might have done it right from a tax standpoint, but it surely wasn't right from a legal standpoint. And it
Sure.
was right there on public record, wrong, wrong, wrong. And that's the other problem. You might go to a great attorney they probably don't specialize in asset protection stuff. And maybe they do. Maybe they got it right. And it is set up right from a protection standpoint. But maybe they don't understand the tax side of it. And it wasn't set up right from a tax standpoint. So these are things that we constantly have to be mindful of, that it is set up right from a tax and legal standpoint, and that you're operating it properly. Basic things. Well,
Yeah.
that's why we have you talk about our coaching, we have our coaching department in our office. That's what they're there for. When you have tax or legal questions, this thing pops up. Call your coach if you're not sure. All the time you
Yeah.
get stuff in the mail. You're like, do I need to pay this? It looks pretty official. Oh no, it's a scam oftentimes. So just
Yeah.
little things like that, to be able to call and verify and make sure you're not throwing money out the window because you're getting scammed on something that looks official for your entity. Things that we
Yeah.
help with.
I'll give you one quick anecdote for that. I mean, you obviously know me for years, Adam, and we've gotten things in the mail. We recently worked on the issue here in San Diego with we put my wife's mother's property into a trust, right? And obviously that can trigger some tax issues there. But the ability for me to call you guys, and I think between you and one of your lawyers, you guys spent an hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone with me. That the cost alone to get that type of that type of access to just a traditional lawyer to have somebody just kind of walk me through and show me some stuff on, the Secretary of State website stuff here and the San Diego County websites costs a lot of money, right? That's something that you guys not necessarily include every time, but the access you give on questions, getting things in the
Yep.
mail, calling you guys, has for me has always been, a nice comfort level there. So, getting into working with you, I'd like to give you some floor here just to talk about kind of working with you guys, investors who want to get their asset protection structure in place. What does working with you guys actually look like? Where do most people start?
Yeah, so that we are the do it for you is if you're a DIY, you want to do it on your own. There's a lot of things that you can do yourself.
Oh yeah.
But this part of it, please don't do this yourself. Have a professional do it. It'll be done right. And it most of the time it will save you a lot of time and a lot of money just to do it right from the beginning. And you'll have peace of
Yep.
mind. It's all set up and operating properly. Little things like renewals. So I form the company and then we have to register appropriately with what state you're buying property in. Little things we have to do to be in compliance. We put in your operating agreement. You got to have one board meeting every year. And it's silly. There is no legal requirement that any details of this meeting be documented. You only have to document a meeting was held and you and the other members were present. So you could literally write on the paper, the LLC will operate the same this year as it did last year, sign it, date it, put it in your record book, and you're good. I
Yep.
think it would be very wise to have a thoughtful meeting and review last year. We didn't commingle funds, our properties operated properly, or do some repairs, and we're projecting for next year. Have a thoughtful meeting, and that's something that you maybe chat GPT to do a simple meeting, annual meeting minutes or something like that. By the way, that reminds me, be very, very careful of what you use AI tools for. I was reading a recent court case where a guy had used an AI tool to go and look at all these different ways that his attorney is trying to figure out some things on his own to help his attorney and help his case. Well, all that stuff was discoverable in court, and he literally handed the plaintiff a playbook on how to get his stuff just because of his searches. So be very mindful about that. There's certain things that I love AI, but certain things I want to use it for, certain things I don't. So just a reminder for that. Be very careful what you're, into AI and getting advice and guidance on. And oftentimes, I was on the phone with one of our CPAs. I work our whole team, we work hand in glove with our CPAs and our attorneys on things all the time. So I was talking to one of our CPAs, and the question that came up, I said, you know what? Could we write off mileage if I'm an investor and I own a property and it's 2 hours away? Can I write off the mileage to go look at that, go check on the property? And I think in my head, well, logically, you're going there to check on your rental property. So your mileage, you can write that off. And the CPA's response was, yeah, you can write that up. Well, while he's saying, oh, give me just a minute. Because the question is always, it depends. So he's like, could I write off the mileage? It depends is usually the answer. But he said, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can do that. So I put in my search, can we write off mileage to go check on a property? And my, AI Google tool says, no, you can't write off the mileage to check on a property. And then he's saying, yes. So I'm like, okay, this is conflicting, a hallucination, if you will. I had to ask the right question. And the right question is, if I have a home office, can I write off the mileage to go check on my property? And once I typed that in, then it said, now you're thinking, yes, because you have a home office, now you can do the mileage. Whereas if you didn't have a home office, you can't. So something for you to be mindful of if you're a real estate investor and you have your own properties, you want to do mileage or things of that nature. Most people at minimum, they do, it's called the safe harbor method of accounting, where you only get $5 a square foot up to 300 square feet. But it's important to have if you're trying to do mileage places. Otherwise, IRS says, nope, that is a commute. You went there, you came back, you don't have some type of an office in your home, you can't do that. So the safe harbor, you only get $5 a square foot up to 300 square foot. But it's very flexible. If you just had a corner with a desk and a computer in it, Your total square footage is 20 square feet. It's not worth much. It's $100 deduction. But if you combine that with 72.5 cents a mile, that's worth a lot more than you think. So these are things that you need to be talking about with your CPA to decide what is going to be best and most advantageous for you. That's where we come into play. If you got a good CPA, great. Anyone, let us know. We got a great team of CPAs that we can help you do great work, and we specialize in real estate. So those are things we can help with over time if you need it.
That's great.
Love it. Love that.
Right. So last question for you, Adam. For an investor who's maybe listening to this episode going, I need to get my ducks in a row, or a newer investor, what's the one thing they should do this week to get started getting their protection in place?
Call NCH or use the link. I'm sure you guys are going to have a link that we can provide. Click the link and schedule an appointment. Pick a time that is good for you. Make sure if it's you, a spouse, significant other, partners, make sure you pick a time where everybody's involved, and we can educate you. Every situation is unique and different, and what worked for your best friend may or may not work for you. So be very careful about that. Work with one of our experts. Let us lay out a plan for you. We can tell you, here's what we should do. Here's what the cost is. Here's what the time frame is. And then you can make an educated decision based on the facts, not on guessing or thinking, but by knowing the facts. Here's what it's going to cost me to set it up. Here's what it's going to cost me to maintain. And it's based on your risk tolerance level. So again, if you just want to keep that one property in your name, or you just have a couple properties in your name and you're okay with that, then leave it there. I just talked to a guy. He couldn't wrap his mind around. He lives in California, $3 million home. He owes like $900,000 on it. So a couple $1,000,000 of equity. And he has a property in Missouri, Indiana, and Florida. And he could not wrap his mind around. All those properties are between $150,000 and $200,000 properties. And he just couldn't see himself spending that money to get an LLC set up. And I reminded him, I said, yeah, those little dinky properties that you have, you're putting your $2 million at risk.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. It's your risk tolerance level, not mine. I would never do that. If you're my brother, I say, do that immediately.
Take action, guys. So take action is the message.
Yes. Yeah. So, building wealth in real estate, right? It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes planning, and protecting that shouldn't be an afterthought. It needs to be part of that plan from the start. It's like Nate said,
100%.
Take action, get on the phone with NCH. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Nate and John, as always. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Adam.
Take care.
Appreciate it.